Welcome, welcome, welcome to Cosmic Dia. I'm so excited to sit down and chat with you. I'm so excited about today's episode. Today, we're chatting with Cynthia Magaña, a licensed clinical social worker, therapist, trauma-informed yoga instructor, and past life meditation facilitator who bridges psychology, cultural lineage through practice. And so I'm so excited to chat past lives, dreams. So can you tell me a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so a little bit about my background is I identify as a queer Chicana therapist. I am a granddaughter of Juanita and Anita. Both come from different areas of Mexico and the Southwest. And both grandmas definitely incorporated spirituality in their own way. Like when I was 13, like 13, 15, my grandma took me to get my first tarot card reading. And then my grandma Juanita, her practice through spirituality was through a lot of prayer. So I really have been connected to ritual, like since I was a little kid. And the ways both grandmas have passed over. So the ways for me to feel connected to my grandparents is to engage in spiritual connection. And what a beautiful way for to be like offered in connecting with my ancestors through spirituality and through the mediums, honestly, that they've like passed on for me.
Yeah, what a beautiful bridge and portal to be able to access that
Mhm.
wisdom and support and celebrate it in community. I'm so grateful to sit down and talk with you today. I know Mercury retrograde, we've been having to like reschedule and I'm forgetting this and that. So I'm excited to chat about your work. So can you tell me a little bit about what is past life healing?
Yeah, I love talking about this. So essentially, past life healing is we're going into a past life of yours, and I think it's important to always like talk about decolonizing, and many cultures have experienced past lives, in my culture as a first gen Mexican American, there is such a beautiful wisdom of like Aztec medicine, Mayan medicine, and even in other cultures through Buddhism of like talking about the afterlife and like reincarnation and connection to spirituality. So I always like to ground the work that we do in let's first understand like what is our ancestral wisdom that's been passed on to us. And then as we, continue to evolve into the society that we are in, we are entering in the phase of like Western psychology. So we think about Carl Jung, we think about, the creator of past life healing, past life regression, Dr. Brian Weiss, who talk about we've have lived past lives before, and that's coming from the Western
Mhm.
framework. But in, our culture, like in ancestral culture and wisdom, like past lives have literally been a holy place and a holy ground for us to experience what wisdom do we get from the gods, what wisdom do we get from spirit and from our ancestors. And it's so beautiful. So past life is a past life that we may have experienced. It is maybe something that we have like had a familiarity with, of like, oh, I feel like I've known you before, or I feel like I've experienced this exact moment, or why do I know so much about a specific place that I have never been to? And I think that these are all very like radical, intuitive experiences that someone who is open, to receiving and to allowing themselves versus folks who are thinking about like worshiping of the written word or the scripture or religion and, like colonization, so it's really about trusting into our intuition and being open and willing to receive.
Right? That's what it feels like, an opportunity to go inward
Hmm.
to your roots
Hmm.
rather than externally searching for something outside of yourself.
Hmm.
And I love the liminal space of dream work
Hmm.
being, a portal, if you will, to
Yeah.
access this deeper wisdom. It's
Mhm.
almost like information being transmitted through the natural world,
Mm.
cosmology,
Yeah.
and dreams. And that has been like a huge anchor for me to trust something outside of myself.
Mm.
Growing up with my tias, hearing them talk about dreams and dreaming of things to come
Mhm.
or getting messages.
Mhm.
And I, of course, when I was young, thought that was so cool. But the more I talk to other Chicanas, Latino, like it's within our culture to have these dreams that
Mhm.
we get information or
Yeah.
we understand things that it might be hard to explain why we understand them or
Mhm.
information shown to us. And so, just to kind of share a little bit why I was so excited when you reached out to me to speak on this professionally, I have like so many questions. But I thought a lot about when I first started doing this work professionally, quote unquote, scheduling readings full time as an astrologer. It was a little out of the box. My close family they're pretty traditional in their sense of jobs. And one of my sisters, who's very Capricorn, called me and she's strict. She's got that Capricorn energy. And she was just like, I normally don't tell people when I dream things. I forget exactly what she said, but basically she said, like, this is your path. Don't give up. This is
Mhm.
what you think it is. And it really held so much weight. I didn't even quite I was like, okay, thank you. I was
Mhm.
just grateful that she shared it because she, normally has the great boundaries as a Capricorn. And so I really took it to heart. And I actually called her just recently to just be like, hey, can you tell me a little bit more? I know it was like 5 years ago now, but what did you dream? And she was like, gosh, I don't remember what the dream was, but I just remember, thinking, oh, I gotta let you know.
Mhm.
So yeah, can you tell me a little bit about maybe your experience with dreams and your past life work and how you bring this to community?
Definitely. Yeah. Oh, man. I'm like, we love sage advice from a good Capricorn.
Everyone needs a Capricorn head of the family making decisions, having boundaries, showing us what boundaries are.
Definitely, definitely. And, I feel like for me, my relationship to dreams has honestly been a gateway to experience my loved ones who've passed. I feel like as I'm the eldest daughter, but I also come from a really big family. So I have seen, a rise in my elders crossing over. And the more and more I have experienced grief myself, like starting with the loss of my grandma Mita, the more that it has like taken such a conscious effort to maintain this relationship with her. And not only do I like experience her in my dreams, but I also like experience her through roses. And I experience her through like moments. Like my grandma immigrated from Michoacan and two of her favorite songs was Fleetwood Mac, Gypsy Woman, and Dreams, and Red Red Wine by UB40. And I was like, please help me understand. So I connect with it's one of the reasons why I connect with music and also to how I connect with plans and just connect with her. But that has
Let me
been
just
such
take a moment to like I'm like trying not to get emotional because I'm loving hearing this. And I think of, those I've lost as well. And when you mentioned roses, and those songs. I thought of my tias who have passed.
Mhm.
And yeah, that symbolism is just like so rich, not only here in our dreams, but also thinking like astrologically, it's very Venusian and very connection. And I could just go on, but so yeah, thank you. Thank
Oh,
you for sharing that.
yeah, I just want to sit in that Venusian energy, but thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, music's powerful. I even use it whenever one of my tias, who I'm thinking about right now, my tia Lisa passed that night. I'm so grateful I was able to be there. She was sick. We were all there. And I had a moment alone in the car and I just kind of like turned on a random song and like a random song on the radio that was like really meaningful to us came on. And there was just no reason it should have been on. It's like, 30 years old. But I was just like, yeah, there's all of these ways to access this information.
Totally, totally. And yeah, I want to share because I feel like now we're vibing out and this is
Yeah,
great.
that's why we're
Um,
here. Yes.
yeah,
Cosmic,
and
yeah.
yeah, so this has been dream work. Yes, dream work has been such an important portal for me to connect with loved ones that I passed. And like, it's also another amazing gift to know when from the dream now comes into physical form,
Mm.
and like what that lands, how that lands for you and how you land in connection. And for me, it's a beautiful reminder to know that our past, our history, our ancestors are here. And also, like, what is the strength? What is the wisdom? What is the download? What is clearing the karmic path for us to stand? And I feel like when we get out of the sandbox into the physical realm, we get to really experience and play or shift into that intuition, you know.
I'm channeling like a question from the audience right now.
Mhm.
And those listening I even think about like some family members, we've lost a lot in my family, big family. And with that, some people might be wondering, how could you connect to your ancestors in your dream? Is there any type of like ritual or intention that you like to work with or might suggest to those listening to open up that wave?
Definitely like, and this is like one of the things when we're like talking about like decolonizing and coming back to our ancestral roots. And like, first and foremost, like, I always am of the mind of like speaking their name into existence. Like, colonizing white supremacy teaches us to fucking cut the shit. We cut the cord, and in like as identifying as Chicanas, like we come from such a cultural experience and collective
Right, like
experience.
generational. It is rich to have
Generation.
multi-generationals in under one roof.
Exactly. And like through that, and when we are connecting with elders or folks in community who has passed in a collective, like one of the beautiful, like 101, like is doing and offering an offerenda, and creating a space, creating an altar for your loved ones who have passed, whether it's through like their favorite lipstick, whether it's through like a favorite snack, meal, etc., like what offering do you want to dress up for your loved one, So when we're thinking about connecting and past lives and how it's all interconnected, like we are constantly giving back to community and feeding our ancestors and offering this like reciprocal relationship. And we get to like experience like their spirit is like always around us, it's like really like not cutting and submitting to the white supremacy of it all, that once death is done, there's nothing else. Whereas in our cultures, life and death is such a continuous cycle,
Mhm.
So. I always want to like say bring in their names and bring in an altar, bring in an outfit and how can you dress it up and cultivate that and through sitting at your altar, like allowing just like sitting and allowing anything to come up. And it's okay if it doesn't come up the first round, second round, third round, but like really allowing yourself to receive and to be open, and then the more that we're able to be receiving and open and taking our time, the more the more we allow that spaciousness and that slowness, the more that it's going to feel like a Polaroid. Like we're like, we got it, bring it in. Like, and I also feel like that's like also like a portal of like mediumship work
Mhm.
as well.
Definitely. I find a similar language with astrology of some of
Mhm.
the themes and words that you're using. And maybe like the eighth house is
Yeah.
like popping up in my head, you know? And so, like you said, the energy is all around us, but it's just maybe or not whether we can see it visually or not.
Mhm.
And so I do think that's about decolonizing and building a relationship to something beyond view that you can't necessarily see, but maybe that's not all that holds value is what we can see, right? And so, yeah, finding space to return to create that connection is really important. So, tell me a little bit about how you bring this into community and what your offerings are like.
Definitely. Yeah. So I started like I always like to like start with origins of the roots, and
Definitely.
for for me, one of my spiritual teachers, I'd honestly say like who I connect with, who I like really trust with my like spiritual intellect and training is Marcella Kroll. And I met her in LA. She read my cards like in 2014, and I was like, homie can like wow, like they were so spot on. And what they told me ended up happening. Like I ended up meeting someone, in my life, and I was like, oh wow, and like how this person like played a role in that chapter. And I was like, okay, like let me keep going to this person. I think they were just so phenomenal in how they held space and their Sacred Symbols Oracle deck. For me, it was like very easy to read and to understand. So
I like the
when,
idea of expanding on symbolism with this as well.
yeah, definitely. And when they had an offering for past life healing out in LA, and I was like, oh, I'm definitely gonna go. Like this is something that I'm gonna do solo. So I ended up going by myself, and there was like a group of people. I was like, I don't know what I'm getting into. Like I don't know if I'm about to be like if this is like my Bruja initiation or like what is happening. But it was not scary. It was not
Right.
scary
It
at
feels so
all.
scary though. I mean, honestly, I'm a little introverted doing anything. I get a little nervous, but
Mhm.
yeah, you're always like really like pleasantly surprised when you like trust your instincts and like come into community with others. Yeah.
Definitely. Like, and it was something like you were saying before we hit record was, we we don't like we are understanding like who's going to be in that space, and chances are it's going to be people who you might resonate with and how there might be a common thread, you
Yeah, I
know.
think the more honest you are and authentic you are and like loud about who you are, the people for you can be like, "Oh, hey, same." And then the people not for you, I don't know,
Yeah.
I haven't seen them. No. Like I probably like repel them, which is great.
Yeah, and we sat in meditation and it was guided by Marcella, and
So
we
like
get
good vibes, good people, bringing good people together. Yeah.
yeah, and it was like dimly lighted, everyone had their own safe space, and we were able to, like get into a group space of like let's do some breath work, let's do some grounding, and we're energetically open, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And then from there we got guided into a space of whatever imagery that the facilitator wants to craft. A very traditional um, way of offering is like going through like a home, going through finding a door,
An
a
elevator or something. Right, right, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
an elevator. And
A
I think it's
crossroads.
yeah, and I think it's just really up to the facilitator of how they relate and how they
And
want to
they might
facilitate.
channel and right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And when I did my past life, I was in it was in the 1920s. It was in like the nine yeah, it was definitely in the 1920s. Like I was not I was myself, but I was walking and I was like walking with a kid and I was walking with a partner, and that was like the first scene of like, where are you? Who are you with? What is happening? And we were walking along water, and I was just like really taking in like all of this like sensory information.
Right. Just thinking about water alone, like the symbolism that that holds.
Yeah, yeah. And like the person who I was with was like honestly like someone who I've known since second grade, and
Mhm.
who was like such a dear, dear friend. It was like a dear, complicated friendship. I was like, okay, so that makes sense why you are here and why we're so like connected. And then we transition to like a few moments in your life, and you go to the final scene of your life, and it's like, where are you? Who are you with? What is happening? So for some folks, you really get to like witness and see like maybe like above, hovering above of like how you're passing, maybe you're directly experiencing how you are passing. And I think that was something that like I experienced of like witnessing myself and then also like hovering above, and I think it's just a way for one, like how your body and how your mind is like gonna take care of you and like
Yes.
help you like really integrate what needs to be like said, what needs to be undone. And you bring yourself back like through the final questions of like, what does this mean? How are we bringing this into the here and now? Is there anything that you need to like offer yourself, integrate, etc.? And then like bring yourself back into the present moment. And we pause and it's heavy work, it's really deep work.
I know
And
for some
also
reason I'm getting kind of like choked up right now. I had to take a little drink of water. I'm like, okay, maybe there's work here for me to uncover. Yeah, that's so interesting. Like, how do you feel hearing this? What's coming up for you?
yeah,
Yeah, it's so interesting. So
definitely.
sorry, continue. Is this
Yeah.
a little bit about kind of what you're going to be offering in community as well through what
Mhm.
you've learned here?
Yeah, definitely. So I think what I want to offer to community, this is going to be, like my first spiritual offering, and it's not group therapy, it's not hypnosis, it's a really like guided meditation. We're not under the influence. You have full respect, consent, and autonomy and free will of your own self. And
I like that part. That is important. That's a really interesting point too. When you think about maybe who's done a lot of this work in like the 60s and 70s, I kind of get turned off from like, the colonized lens, but you're
Mhm.
right to have like that trust within yourself and to not give away control is
Yeah,
important. I think, yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And, for me, I think just as a trauma-informed practitioner, as a licensed clinical social worker, it's just
Mhm.
so important in the way that I show up that you have full autonomy and choice. There are ways to like come out of it. You were not under hypnosis, and this isn't a
But
substance.
I credit you with those values because some people can call themselves that can have the same schooling and not have the same values. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it can all kind of be like a colonized hierarchy. So
Yeah.
for me, it does, cultural elements are important. I want to go where I can trust.
Hmm.
Looking back at history, it's natural to have some questions about like, who are we learning from?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for me, like, there is years of connecting, like years of connecting.
Yeah. And that cultural background, like you mentioned as well, I
Yeah.
think is important. And
Mhm.
everyone's different, everyone, might gravitate towards different people and folks. And so
Mhm.
I'm so happy to have a space here where we can speak openly and honestly.
Definitely, and I think it's just like part of like white supremacy culture is like worshiping of the written word. And like that
Hmm.
is literally what white supremacy did with spiritual practices.
Yeah, yeah. I started just like throwing things. Yeah, I know. And so to kind of go back to our roots and learn from our ancestors. And
Mhm.
now it's really important, I think, to share that representation because what I hear time and time again is that like not everyone feels like they have access to it for different reasons. I know I lost one of my grandmas before I was born. And so it feels like it could be hard to access some of that wisdom. But like you mentioned, decolonizing and understanding like that's within us, that's around us, whether we can see it or not. So when are you bringing this to community?
Yeah, I'm bringing this to community actually this Sunday, March 15th. I will be hosting a live space in Sacramento at the Summer Moon Yoga Studio. Yeah.
Congratulations, that's so
Thank you.
exciting. I cannot wait until you come to Portland and we get to host an event here because that's what I'm seeing for our future. Yay. Well, come on up to Portland so we can host an event or a workshop. But I know we're short on time. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about your upcoming workshop or how people might connect with you?
Yeah, definitely. So if folks are curious about learning more about me, they can always go to my website at cynmagana, cynmagana.com, or they can follow me on Instagram. I go by the Chicana Therapist. And yeah, I am always happy to offer community offerings and um always curious to learn more about like what brings people into like our ether and our space. And yeah, it's all welcomed.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited that we finally got to sit down and have this conversation. I can already see we're going to sit down again and we're going to continue this chat. I would love to talk astrology and dreams and past lives with you next.
Yeah.
So when we have more time and Mercury stations direct,
Yeah.
that's what I'm holding the vision for.
Mhm.
So thank you, thank you, thank you for taking this time to sit down with me and share about your work. I'm honored, and I'll link your website and your social in the bio in the info so people can connect.
Mhm. So sweet. Thank you so
All
much.
right, my love. Enjoy your day. Talk soon.
Thank you.